Understanding this chart cures young Earth creationism. This isn't just lines on a page. This figure represents real empirical data and observations from the fossil record and genetics. Let me explain. What you're looking at is partly a phylogenetic tree of insect orders based on their genetic similarities, with the orders on the right-hand side of the chart, like Diptera, the flies and mosquitoes, being more genetically similar when we compare all the A's, G's, C's, and T's in their DNA relative to orders like Lepidoptera, the butterflies. And both of those are more similar to each other than to the groups farther on the left-hand side of the chart, which include things like dragonflies and the grasshoppers. Again, this phylogenetic tree is constructed based on genetic similarities between these living organisms' genomes. Now, at the bottom of this figure is where the fossil record comes in. And what makes this such an amazing demonstration of the theory of evolution to the exclusion of all other possible explanations is because on the bottom of the chart we see a representation of the order that these insect groups appear in the fossil record. They're sorting according to age here in millions of years. But if you're a creationist and you're bothered by that, you can, in your mind, change the y-axis of this chart to a percentage of daughter isotope accumulation in the rock strata, and you could achieve basically this exact same chart. Either way, this data is real, regardless of how you choose to plot it on a diagram. And it is this observational data itself which is impossible for a young Earth creationist worldview to explain, or any worldview that doesn't have the theory of evolution. This is because, as you can see in the phylogenetic tree behind me, which is, again, let me just stress, built using DNA similarities of currently living species. And it perfectly mirrors the ordering of these same insect groups within the fossil record. That's what this chart is showing you. The groups on the left, the wingless insects, which do not undergo any metamorphosis, appear first in the fossil record, in the deepest layers, the layers with the most amount of daughter isotopes accumulated in them. Next, the hemimetabolous insects appear in the layers above that. These insects, like the dragonflies, undergo an incomplete metamorphosis, where the juvenile nymph gradually molts into the adult form. Finally, in the layers above those, you can see the earliest appearance of the true holometabola, the insects which undergo true metamorphosis with a full larval, pupal, and adult stage. But look closer and you'll see there is further ordering even within each of these groups, where the order to the farthest left within holometabola, the order known as Hymenoptera, which are like the wasps, the bees, and the ants, and they appear in the earliest layers within holometabola. And then the beetles appear next after that, and then finally the flies, Diptera, mirroring the ordering of these groups reflected in their DNA. That cannot be a simple coincidence. A global flood cannot sort these fossils into rock layers based on their genetics. There is no ordering to these fossils that we find in the ground based on any of their physical characteristics besides species and morphologic evolution and mass extinction events. I mean, they're not sorted based on physical characteristics like density that water could sort these by. How can genetic similarities in the modern day be mirrored in the ordering of the fossils in the Earth's rock layers? This data can only make sense in the light of evolution. And the last little sprinkle on top that makes all of this even worse for the creationist is, did you notice how some of these branches are a little bit thicker than others as they get taller? Well, the thickness of each of these branches represents the sheer number of different fossil families found for each of these different orders. The thicker the line, the greater the variety of fossil families that we know of from documented records. Notice how the number of fossil insect families evolves over time and gets thicker as you go higher up in the layers. This is exactly expected by the theory of evolution and is a major problem if you're a creationist. And all of this data is based on museum records. So you can find the citation yourself and go check out this data in the video description. If you think there is some flaw here in this data or this chart, this graph, this evidence, please go through the source for yourself. Look at the data yourself. Really, research thoroughly for the reasons why each of these different families of fossil insects is distinguished from each other, and why paleontologists have sorted them this way. There are distinct reasons that you can find. I dare you to find the flaw in their methodology. And especially for how each layer was dated, if you discover a flaw in these reasonings, you can make a great impact in the scientific fields of etymology, taxonomy, and paleontology. If you object to the very idea of there being ordering to these rock layers, I invite you to watch live streams of scientists using radiometric dating methods on samples live on camera, or go and look for fossils yourself in these layers, and you'll see, just like I have, there is a distinct ordering. You can only find certain fossils in certain layers, and there's an order to it. You cannot deny this if you've done it yourself. You can pore over the data from these museum records, the publicly available records in the citation, in the description, and you can look at their methods and see if they're applying them consistently and accurately. You could do this with radiometric dating as well. There's plenty of publications showing in global labs across the world blind samples of radiometric dating that is accurate and consistent. I understand that this data is hard to wrap your head around. It can be very technical, but if you can truly understand the very real, unobservable, verifiable scientific data that went into making this chart behind me, then you can truly, you can't be a young earth creationist anymore if you can actually understand it. There's no other valid explanation for this data unless your God is just a trickster God who deceives us all by creating such a perfect ordering and alignment between genetics and the fossil record in order to trick us into believing a false theory with literal mounds of interdisciplinary evidence supporting it. It just doesn't make any sense theologically, philosophically, rationally, or empirically to be a creationist in the 21st century who rejects the theory of evolution when we have not only the evidence shown in this chart here. Oh no, this chart is sufficient by itself to demonstrate that evolution is true, but we have so much more evidence. But I talk about that more on this channel, so check out my other videos and debates about evolution, biology, genetics, the origin of life, and so many other topics in science and history if you're curious about any of that. And please make sure that if you are already subscribed, make sure you have that bell clicked so you get notified for new videos. Until next time, peace.